I don't think there's any evidence that's ever been presented of that. The only thing that's ever brought up is that Victoria Nuland phone call a billion times. So that happened all on its own, number one. Number two, the framing of Russia had to invade Ukraine because Ukraine might have joined NATO. Like, what would be the threat?
Well, he didn't say that they had to. Now you're just putting words in his mouth. He didn't ever say that they had to.
To Russia, if Ukraine joined NATO, the threat would be that they wouldn't be able to invade Ukraine. What?
I mean, you're making me respond to a framing that I did not provide. I didn't say
exactly
that Russia had to invade.
You know, if you were in charge to wrap up this war, I believe both of you guys want peace in the region. So what would be the plan? What should we do right now?
You force Ukraine to give Russia another 99-year lease on Sevastopol because they really like that base and they need access to the Black Sea, and whatever part of their Black Sea fleet is left, and they can go ahead and have that, I guess. And then you force them to give back all the other conquered territory, the rest of Crimea included, no-fly zone over Ukraine, and you start shooting down Russian planes. And if Russia doesn't like it and Putin says he wants to nuke people, then you invite him to see if he wants to do it.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Let's risk a nuclear war because we think Putin is just bluffing. All right, Destiny.
Let's talk about Russia-Ukraine. So it was widely seen in the West, the invasion of Ukraine, as unprovoked, and people largely sided with Ukraine. However, some perspectives on the war shifted as the U.S. sent nearly $175 billion in aid. So was Putin's decision to invade at all justified, and how could the U.S. have improved its response to the war? I'll go first.
Yeah, I don't think that there was any justification for the invasion of Ukraine. There's a number of issues that people lay out, but I think all of them are red herrings. People can say it was NATO expansionism that did it, but that clearly wasn't the case because NATO has expanded. Russia hasn't gone to war with any countries like Ukraine. It only happened in response to the 2014 ousting of Yanukovych. Some people say that that it was for the denazification of Ukraine, and the Azov battalion is like a few hundred people. This is not true. It's just obviously not true. They had I believe it was a Jewish head of state and a Jewish vice president at the same time. Like, the idea that there's some huge Nazi problem in Ukraine has just never been true. Some argue that it was because of the ethnic cleansing of ethnic Russians in the Donbass. That's not true. There was an active war that's been facilitated there by Russia for at least 10 years. I mean, the reason why they invaded Ukraine is because they wanted to control Ukraine in a similar way that they control Belarus. Putin more or less said this, that they're the same kindred spirit of people, and that he basically wants to see a reformation of like a Soviet Union-esque type nation state between Russia, between Belarus, between Ukraine. I think that the biggest issue that the United States had was we didn't have like a unified response to what we wanted to do. Initially, we were really big on supporting Ukraine, but for reasons and Trump and whatever random stuff, the conservatives started to break off from that and decided that we needed to become isolationist again, I guess, and not have any relationship with anything going on in the rest of the world, unless I guess it's pouring tons of money into Israel for whatever reason. I think that the biggest mistake that the United States made was not to have when I say unified response, I mean that we're unified at home about how we're going to deal with this, and to not have Ukrainians sitting in a ditch waiting on whether or not they're getting artillery shells based on whether or not an immigration bill is going to be combined with foreign support for the war, I guess.
Okay, so what about how we would change, how would you change the response to the war in Ukraine? Like, would you change anything that Biden did? Would you change anything? I assume you'd want to change some things that Trump has done.
I think making greater weapon systems, F-16s and everything else like available to them from the start, I think would have been good. I don't think we should ever utter the word like nuclear anything. The idea that we should allow somebody to bully us around because of nuclear threats is absolute bullshit. And the idea that we need to be afraid of Russia and give them basically carte blanche to invade any country in the world because they have nuclear weapons is insane. I don't think Putin is that suicidal. And all the same arguments that people made about being worried about World War III or nuclear winter would apply the exact same if they were to invade a NATO ally. And I would hope that we wouldn't use the same arguments and abandon NATO as well, although Trump has talked about that and shown a desire to do that a ton. But I think that basically telling Ukraine, listen, as long as you guys want to fight, you have everything that's available to you that you can fight with. Good luck. As opposed to this dishing out selectively weapons over time depending upon the political will is at
Where's
home for
Neri?
it.
Blime is still on. Smiley face.
Yep. Actually, I'm about to leave soon because I should probably eat something today.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. So first to the question of justification. I mean, the question is like, what does justification mean?
But this is a good conversation. But by the way, Mortonary, Destiny finally conceded in the argument of like, oh, I wish we could just have a good conversation about these things. And the guy finally said somewhere around here. Was it here?
Have been waiting in line and are willing to never had some sort of system illegally. Proposal
Where's Neri?
requires
The plan. Do you
I'll
want to
watch
add
it
yours?
all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
Okay. I mean, but he finally conceded into that.
justification mean? Are we talking about moral justification? Are we talking about has there been any incentive provided? Have we provoked them in any way? Look, I don't think there's a moral justification for an invasion. I think it's clear that from just a purely moral standpoint, no, I don't think Putin should have invaded Ukraine. I think there were many options available to him. I think he was opportunistic. I do think that many people have been glazing over the things that America has done to at least give Putin plausible reasons to the international community to invade. So Stephen mentioned the ousting of Yanukovych and our involvement in the Maidan Revolution in 2014. It's like, yeah, that's a plausible reason why Putin could say, hey, you guys have been violating Ukraine's sovereignty. You guys have been turning Ukraine into a Western satellite. Now this is a security threat. Does it warrant him invading? No, but it's something that he can say. Just like...
Putin's not wrong when he said that. Like, We probably shouldn't have done that. We gave him the plausible deniability. Just because we gave him the plausible deniability doesn't mean that Trump, like Putin's supposed to can do whatever he wants. But like, are we gonna sit here on our high horse being like, oh, we have nothing to do with this? Like, no, obviously.
Say Russia was in talks with Mexico to create some sort of Russian-Mexican treaty organization or something like that. Would I say that that's okay? We should just invade Mexico now? No. Would I say that that is part of a stack of reasons that needs to be addressed? Otherwise, it's eventually going to lead to military intervention. Yeah, I would say that. So part of my issue is that this like black and white framing of like Putin was completely in the wrong. It's irrational. He's just trying to take more land and reconstitute the Soviet Union. Well,
Yeah.
if that's all you believe, then there's no appealing to self-interest and there's no reconciliation possible, and the only possibility is total war. And I just fundamentally don't believe that.
True.
I think.
True.
When we talk about justification here, the better question is, were there reasons why Putin invaded that we could have not furnished him with if we had approached our diplomatic approach differently? And I think yes. I think we've meddled in Ukraine, again, when we talk about the 2014 revolution, in ways that I think would cause any neighbor in the surrounding region to be concerned. And I can totally see why Putin was concerned. And I think rather than subversively supporting a revolution and deposing someone who is more Russian aligned and replacing them with someone who's more Ukrainian aligned, we should have actually been in relationship with Russia. And I think that's one of the biggest failings of our foreign policy agenda. And I think since the 1990s, we've been stuck in this old view of Russia evil, Putin dictator wants to take over the world, next Hitler. We shouldn't even talk to him. And yeah, throughout 2022 and 2023, we saw that agenda be prosecuted to its logical conclusion, which is Biden's not talking to Putin. He's giving weapons to Ukraine. He's agitating Putin. And years later, this war is still going on. It's the bloodiest conflict on earth. And we've been out of pocket for over $100 billion. We weren't any closer to a resolution of this by the end of 2024. So when we talk about justification, it's like, no, I don't think him invading is justification. I think, call me an idealist, I don't think offensive killing of people is ever justified. And there were things that we could have done before to actually prevent this from even getting to that place, or so that even if Putin was hell-bent on getting to this place, we actually would have been on the clear moral high ground, so there was a clear mandate to be unified in our response. And where I agree with Stephen is we've done this half-in, half-out thing. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, where we're saying we're going to send certain things and then we don't, and then we're saying that we're going to start negotiations and then we're backing into Ukraine's corner again, then we're backing to Putin's corner. It's very confusing. And it's protracted this conflict a lot longer than it needs to. I would have said either at the beginning we need to be like fully we stand with Ukraine, we give them everything that they need, this is now a proxy war through Ukraine, let's fight it and win, or we're completely out and we say, look, they're not a part of NATO and it's not our responsibility. And I, frankly, as much as my heart goes out to the Ukrainian people, because it sucks to get invaded, like it sucks, they're the smaller country, they don't have the arms to fully resist Putin without our help, it's not our fight. And
True.
Here we get to a more fundamental disagreement about what is America's role in the world. I tend to take, I mean, it's always a spectrum between isolationist and interventionist. I think we've gone too far in the interventionist direction. I think we keep on finding really hollow moral justifications for getting involved in conflicts. And to me, it's just about self-interest. Like, that's the cleanest way to do this. I don't see a compelling reason why it's strongly in America's self-interest to donate hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine over any other conflict in the world. There's tons of horrible things going on in the world. I don't see why, I don't see why we believe that if we don't help Ukraine, then Putin's going to run roughshod over the rest of Europe, and all of a sudden we're going to be next, like Zelensky has said several times. We have NATO. If he invades a NATO nation, then we fight. That's the whole point of the agreement. So countries that are not a part of NATO, we should not be signaling, like Biden was doing, that, oh, Ukraine's going to join NATO, there's no timeline, and then giving Putin some sort of justification he can provide to the world, even if some of the world doesn't believe him. Instead, let's make commitments, let's honor them, and let's not go past them. And I think we've gone past them with no clear rationale.
The 2014 Euromaidan, the idea that the U.S. was involved in that, there's no substantiation to that in any way, size, shape, or form, right?
What was it? Was it Victoria Nuland?
Yeah, but it's a Nuland phone call where all we said was there's a one leader we prefer over the other. That's not substantiation in any way, size, shape, or form that we participated in that. There had been a whole series of protests up to that point. There were good reasons for the Ukrainian people to be mad. There's no evidence that the United States fomented that.
Yeah, so my understanding is the CIA actually did help foment that. So it was a grassroots revolution, just to be clear. Something that the Ukrainian people wanted to do. My understanding is that we did covertly support that.
And what I don't, and how?
So my understanding is that, I don't know if this is a USAID thing or a separate part of the US, of the CIA did this, but that we funded this and we helped provide propaganda to the Ukrainian community to help support this.
Okay, I don't think there's any evidence that's ever been presented of that. The only thing that's ever brought up is that Victoria Nuland phone call a billion times. So that happened all on its own, number one. Number two, the framing of Russia had to invade Ukraine because Ukraine might have been, joined NATO. Like, what would be the threat?
He didn't say that they had to. Now you're just putting words in his mouth. He didn't ever say that they had to.
To Russia, if Ukraine joined NATO, the threat would be that they wouldn't be able to invade Ukraine. What?
Well, the threat is that we can mount weapons there. Like
we can mount weapons, and we already have countries that are bordering Russia and NATO.
And not all of them are within striking distance of Moscow.
You don't think that Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania could shoot missiles into Moscow?
They're not as close. It's more of an existential threat.
I don't think so. They're close enough to shoot missiles into
and
it.
besides that, you're making me respond to a framing that I did not provide. I didn't say
Exactly.
that Russia had to invade. I didn't
I'm
say
saying it's
Yeah.
not even a justification.
I didn't say that this is only a security concern. I do think Putin had his own reasons for invading. I think yes, part of this is about ethnic Russians, and he's viewing ethnic Russians.
Sure, I'm just going piece by piece. I'm saying for the NATO one, NATO's never attacked Russia, right?
Of course not.
So why does he think that Ukraine joining is magically going to be the time now that NATO is going to strike Russia?
Again, I'm not saying it's sufficient justification. I'm saying it's part of his justification.
I understand, and I'm attacking that part piece by piece. I'm not saying that alone. I'm just saying that the 2014 funding by the CIA has never been substantiated. The idea that NATO has somehow magically become a threat to Russia, I don't think that's substantiated. What was the tertiary reason? The only reason I can see to invade Ukraine is because he wants to invade Ukraine. I don't know what excuses we gave him or what we could have headed off.
Well, at minimum, look, maybe there's some, and this is obviously hard to substantiate because we're talking about a covert operation that may or may not have existed, and Victoria Nuland's call may or may not substantiate the existence of this covert operation.
Well, to be very clear, the only thing that Nuland call said was that there was one leader who would prefer another. That leader didn't even get elected after Euromaidan. So, we have preferences for leadership around the world all the time. That doesn't mean we're covertly supporting some project to cause a revolution and to oust a leader in a country just because we prefer one over another.
Yeah, and of course, again, with covert operations, it's very hard to substantiate what happened or not.
Yeah, but we wouldn't believe it just because we can't substantiate it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I believe it 100%. I'm saying there's a perception, and let's say it is true to any degree, that to me that's evidence that we are prosecuting an agenda of getting involved in countries that we don't need to be involved in at all. And
you don't think Europe is an interest to the United States?
I'm not talking about Europe. We're talking about Ukraine.
Ukraine is a part of Europe, and I think European sees that as an essential part of European security, right?
I'm saying some European countries are in NATO, and we've made commitments, and we've made the assessment that yes, it makes sense to provide security to them. Ukraine was not one of them, at least not up to this point. Now,
sure, but I mean, they did give up the nuclear weapons, right?
Yeah, they did, and there was a Budapest Memorandum, and there's a reason why we didn't add in any enforceability clause, because evidently we didn't find Ukraine to be valuable enough to America's security to put ourselves on the line and say we're going to provide security guarantees. So
well, it was also probably because it was in '94, literally 3 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, and the United States providing a security guarantee to a country bordering Russia would be seen as an egregious overstep because the entire world after the fall of the Soviet Union was really scared that a unipolar world was going to see the United States take over every single country. So that makes sense why we would provide a solid security guarantee there. But what message do we send to the rest of the world if we say, okay, well, you know, these guys didn't have nuclear weapons. Look what happened to them. And now you've got countries in the Middle East that are clamoring for nuclear weapons. I mean, wouldn't they look at Ukraine and go, yeah, clearly we need them because we can't rely on any help from anybody if we don't actually have nukes to defend ourselves?
Yeah, and I think you're saying the second order effect is that people would be concerned that, okay, any neighbor can invade any other neighbor and no one's going to step in. And I think that's a reasonable concern. And I would say that's a concern that we contemplate by making a commitment prior to this and say, hey, okay, for the countries where we believe it's important for us to make formal security guarantees, let's do that. We didn't make that formal assessment for Ukraine, and I think it's reasonable to say, yeah, Ukraine was not essential to American interests. Now, post hoc, maybe you believe that they should have been already in NATO. Do you believe they should have been in NATO already?
This is like a weird catch-22. It comes back. It's almost like the immigration question, where conservatives or people will say that, well, if we were going to protect Ukraine, they should have been in NATO, or we should put a country in NATO. But then it's like,
we've already okay, then talk to him, not conservatives. Like, we already clarified that he's not conservative. Like, oh, it's almost like this thing that conservatives do. Like, yeah, like that's great, Destiny. Yes, you can draw parallels to everything. Yeah, Hitler also drank water too. Are you going to compare that to him? You drinking water sometimes? Like, well, what are you saying? Like, there's comparisons everywhere. This is just a dead, he's basically saying nothing at this point.
Okay, well, are you in favor of expanding NATO? I think all the other people on that side would say no. So I don't know if it would be a
Go back a little bit.
Do you believe they should have been in NATO already?
This is like a weird catch-22. It comes back. It's almost like the immigration question, where conservatives or people will say that, well, if we were going to protect Ukraine, they should have been in NATO, or we should put a country in NATO. But then it's like, okay, well, are you in favor of expanding NATO? I think all the other people on that side would say no. So I don't know if it would be appropriate for NATO to expand. I do think it would be important to send a clear message that, hey, if you invade a country and try to steal land from them, that's just something we don't really do now in this century. We just don't. That's just not the rules of the world anymore. And if you do that, there should be an unequivocal message from the rest of the world saying you're going to be punished for this harshly.
Yeah, and I think the limits of that should extend to economic sanctions and the things that we have been doing toward Russia. It should not involve some sort of really committed military effort, which is what it would have been required in order for Russia to lose this war by now. And I agreed with you that we need to either be all in or all out. My preference is we're all out. It sounds like maybe your preference is we're all in because we need to preserve the global order. And I'm saying I fundamentally disagree. And yeah, there's countries invade other countries all the time, unfortunately. And it's not our job to police it on principle. We police it strategically with people we have prior agreements with.
Countries don't really invade countries all the time, especially in Europe. It's a pretty exceptional circumstance. I think that's why this is such an exceptional thing. Is that European security, I think, is a thing that fundamentally the West is like. I mean, the West is right, like Europe and the United States. I think we all have a big interest here, and letting Russia, do this over and over and over again, I think it probably doesn't bode well for the future either.
Yeah, so if that's the case, then we need to contemplate it in our commitments. Like for me, it's actually just as simple as that. Like either we agree that Ukraine is so important to the global order and we want to protect Ukraine and we give them security guarantees up front. I'm saying there was an assessment made that it's not that important to us, and I think it's actually not even just that it's not that important to us, that Putin has made it clear that he does not want Ukraine joining NATO. Now, you can say that the subversive reason or the implicit reason is because he planned to invade it all the time, which is totally possible. But from my perspective, yeah, I don't want us...
official.
I don't...
All right, man. I got a dip. Great stream. I'll definitely be coming back.
Sweet. I
Skakru
appreciate
official.
it.
Have a great day.
All right, you too. I'm also gonna dip pretty soon too, as well. I think. Oh, do we want to? Oh man, they saved the last. They saved the last for best. They saved the best. I thought about it for a second because I knew I was gonna say like wrong, but then I ended up saying wrong anyways by thinking about it. You're gonna save the best for last. The Israel-Palestine stuff. I love that stuff. But okay.
Don't want us getting into
Where's
armed
Neri?
conflict with Russia
See you
unless we've
later.
already made a commitment. And in this case, we shouldn't have made a commitment.
We're gonna watch it. Like I was gonna be like, let me see what the last thing is, and I'll just end at the Ukraine-Russia thing. But I saw Israel-Palestine. I'm like, I kind of want to see that. So we're gonna watch it. We're gonna watch it.
And we didn't, so we don't need to act like we have.
Can I just say,
I can
what
eat
would you
food
guys
later.
both do respectively? You know, if you were in charge to wrap up this war, I believe both of you guys want peace in the region. So what would be the plan? What should we do right now?
You force Ukraine to give Russia another 99-year lease on Sevastopol because they really like that base and they need access to the Black Sea, and whatever part of their Black Sea fleet is left, and they can go ahead and have that, I guess. And then you force them to give back all the other conquered territory, the rest of Crimea included, no-fly zone over Ukraine, and you start shooting down Russian planes. And if Russia doesn't like it and Putin says he wants to nuke people, then you invite him to see if he wants to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, my view on this is obviously Russia is a stronger opponent, but any victory that they would have is a Pyrrhic victory. Like they would lose a lot in order to try to conquer any further. So there is some leverage here. And that's the reason why I think we should not like completely pull out. I think if we completely pulled out, it would be more of a catastrophe for the Ukrainian people than is absolutely necessary. So yeah, unfortunately,
Oh wow, this guy actually gives a much more reasonable take than Destiny. Good job.
they already control a lot of eastern Ukraine and they control Crimea.
Wait,
for
hold
some
up.
period of
Let me
time
see.
now.
Let me listen to what Destiny said. Like, let me see what.
So what would be the plan? What should we do right now?
You force Ukraine to give Russia another 99-year lease on Sevastopol because they really like that base and they need access to the Black Sea, and whatever part of their Black Sea fleet is left, then they can go ahead and have that, I guess. And then you force them to give back all the other conquered territory, the rest of Crimea included, no-fly zone over Ukraine, and you start shooting down Russian planes. And if Russia doesn't like it and Putin says he wants to nuke people, then you invite him to see if he wants to do it.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Let's see if, because I guess Destiny's whole point is that Putin will never nuke. Like Putin is just bluffing. Yeah. So let's risk like world war. Let's risk a nuclear war because we think Putin is just bluffing. All right, Destiny. Yeah. You would be a real warmonger. Like he unironically would be a Hillary Clinton. like actually.
Yeah, my view on this is obviously Russia is a stronger opponent, but any victory that they would have is a Pyrrhic victory. Like they would lose a lot in order to try to conquer any further. So there is some leverage here. And that's the reason why I think we should not like completely pull out. I think if we completely pulled out, it would be more of a catastrophe for the Ukrainian people than is absolutely necessary. So yeah, unfortunately, they already control a lot of eastern Ukraine and they control Crimea for some period of time now. So unfortunately, we have to cede that land to them. At minimum, hopefully we can structure an armistice, if not an outright peace treaty, so that even if they don't completely demilitarize, at least we stop the active conflict. And I know that the U.S. and Ukraine entered this minerals deal. It's questionable how much we can actually harvest like the rare earth minerals from that minerals deal and create some revenue for both of our parties. But I think at least this signals to Russia that we are ideologically aligned with Ukraine, and any further incursions in Ukraine threaten the economic interests. Whether there should be a security guarantee past that, I think it would depend on the specifics of that security guarantee. I mean, I know Zelensky has been clamoring for a security guarantee, and from his perspective, it totally makes sense why he would want something like being in NATO. But again, if the bright line that has been drawn for over 20 years now, is that Ukraine can't join NATO, I think we need to respect that bright line unless we're really willing to fight Russia on this. And I don't think we are, and I don't think we should.
Okay. Yeah, this is part of why I think these conversations are so essential because, respectfully, say you're on the right, you voted for Trump, you supported Kamala Harris. You're not exactly saying what, so-called narratives, you're saying, we shouldn't necessarily pull everything out. We shouldn't just stop funding them. And you're saying that, Destiny, you're saying that we shouldn't continue to necessarily fund this for, eternity is what you're saying, right? You're not.
No, I think we should fund it for as long as I want to fight. Yes. And I think that the opposite position is an unequivocal total surrender of Ukraine to Russia. The idea that they would give up the 5 whatever territories plus power plant to Russia, I think is the most catastrophic version of a surrender basically that Ukraine could have. I think we should fund them for as long as they're willing to fight.
So to clarify, no budget, right? You're just saying to continue.
Yeah, we haven't given them I think $30 to $50 million. I think in actual cash or loan guarantees. The rest is a bunch of weapons. It's causing a lot of trouble for Russia, and they should be having a lot of trouble. They can't just invade Moldova. They can't just invade Georgia. They can't just invade Ukraine. They can't just get involved in level places all over the world over and over and over again with no repercussion. I think the United States is probably the best poised country to send a message to the rest of the world saying you cannot conduct yourself like this. You shouldn't be able to do it. And if the U.S. isn't going to step in and do that, I mean, I don't know who else will.
Okay. Do you want to, before we move to Israel-Palestine, do you want to comment on his point about funding the war?
Yeah, for me, look, the lens I look at this from is what is serving America's self-interest. I agree that morally it's reprehensible for Putin to be invading these countries in Europe. And at the same time, I don't consider this like some sort of domino effect that eventually will hurt the U.S. I'm just fundamentally not concerned. So I don't see why we should have an infinite pocketbook open for Ukraine here, because I don't think it's worth that much to us to be involved in a fight that we didn't start, we weren't involved in. We may be provoked to a degree, but we certainly don't need to be involved in perpetuity.